My name is Thiago Sasai, and I'm from Brazil. I want to share a little about UI5 Web Components using React and Serverless first. And I will show you what you will build or how you can reproduce the application I want to share, and some words about Serverless, a little about the architecture I'm using here in that application, how you can configure and set up the front end and the back end, and I will explain the key points of the code. So the application that was built using UI5 Web Components for React is like a personal expense control. Let me show that in live. So that's the application. I use the shell bar here above with some popovers. This one and this other one is the product popover. I have 2 pages here doing the navigation over these 2 paths. This is just to show you that we have charts in the UI5 Web Components for React, what is very good. And here's then another page where we have a CRUD here. I'm reading the data. We can create new transactions. So example here. And it's all persisted into the database using GraphQL APIs. So of course we can modify, and I'm using here the serverless or the services from AWS. This data is stored in the DynamoDB. So this entry, it's here, right? So it's all provided in a serverless mode. So using GraphQL, like I said, we can delete as well. And it, of course, impacts the entries we have in the DynamoDB table. Okay, so that is the application. I will add an authentication process as well together with you. And let's come back to the slides. So a little about serverless. Serverless is a cloud-native developed model, right, that allow the developer to build applications without having to manage its servers. Of course, there are servers in the serverless, but it's abstracted away from the developing process of the application. So it's very good for who know very well about front-end development, but don't want to care about servers and back-end process or provisioning or maintain that structure. So all of that is provided by the cloud provider. I'm using here AWS, but we have similar process and services in all the others, including BTP as well. And it's one other concept about serverless is that this kind of services you pay for use, so you don't need to provisioning anything in advance. And a little about the architecture using that application is starting from the backend side. I'm using the AppSync to provide the GraphQL services. It's using Lambda functions and DynamoDB to persist the data, and the Amazon Cognito to make the authentication process, and the identity and access management if you want to use authorization as well. So all of this part of the backend here is created using CLI commands through the Amplify CLI. So it's very easy, and everything is created in provision and automatically. And in the front end, of course, you will have the React application with the Amplify libraries to consume the GraphQL and the authentication process, and the UI5 Web Components for all the screen elements. So in case you have situations like that, you want to use another framework like here, I use React, and you want to use any cloud provider services, or you want to use a GraphQL API, UI5 Web Components is a very good option for that, because as you know, in the UI5 framework, we have a very good support, and it's very easy to consume your data and maybe some REST APIs. But in case we have a GraphQL like here, or maybe other kind of structure, or you want to use the libraries that we are have knowledge in React, for example, or in another framework, UI5 Web Components is a very good option in that kind of scenarios. So here I have some steps if you want to reproduce that application in your local machine or in your own environment. It's the same process you use to create any React application. If you are familiar with React, you will know this command here. The only differentiation here is that I use the template provided by the UI5 Web Components for React. And I'm started the application, it will be running already using UI5 Web Components, a simple one, but I need to install, and you need to install the React shards, because it's not installed automatically through the template. And of course, you need to install the Amplify library as well, right? And I'm using the React router, the version above the version 6, to do the transition, the navigation between the paths, the pages I showed, right? So in the backend side, as I say, everything is created by the Amplify CLI. If you want to know more about that and install and configure that in your local machine, you can follow this YouTube video. This deck will be available after the event, so you can follow these links. And in the React application we created in the step before, we just need to amplify it, and it will prepare the services in our application to be used. And of course, we wanted to add the API. I run this command in the command line, amplify add API. They ask me the kind of API I want to use, and I selected GraphQL. Mainly the other questions is default answers. I will not reproduce that now because it takes some time, but it's very straightforward to reproduce that. When I add the API in my application, the amplifier created a file named schema.graphql, and in that schema is where I will define the schema of my API, and it will be replicated and as the database table as well. So it's very simple to define the schema of API. Here I define it just one, the transaction, with these fields. That's the same one that I use in the screen. And here we have a lot of other options to make queries or to make advanced things, but I keep it simple. Of course, we can define a lot of other API that your application need. And after do that, we run the amplify push, and it will create the resources in the cloud. So after this command, they will create the API into the AppSync, the DynamoDB table, and all the Lambda functions required to resolve the link between AppSync and database table, to read, to fetch the data, to update, to create, to delete, and all the mutations we need, the queries and the mutations. That's the GraphQL terminology, right? So, and then you create the libraries you will need to use it in your front end as well. And we can add authentication service, just use Amplify add out. I keep it here, the default settings for the answers, and the same Amplify push, it will make the provisioning of the service into the cloud. So doing these simple steps, we already have our backend ready to be used by our application. So now we need to add the UI5 Web Components into our React application, right? And I jump again to the application to show you the codes about that. So in that React application, everything starts with the index.js, right? Here, we just import the assets for UI5 Web Components and render the application that you are in the app.js. Here is where I'm using the React router to do the navigation or the paths, the two ones I showed before, the dashboard that came to this page, and the transactions, and it changed the URL as well, right? And the main, and every element of this screen in React is a component, right? So each component has URL JSX file, and the main one is this starting point where we have the shell bar here above, right? It's the UI5 Web Component. So here I imported all the components from UI5 I want to use it. And we have two popovers, right? The profile and the product. And I prefer to define these two popovers into separate components. So I have here the profile when I'm using these components from UI5, popover list, standard list, and title. And it's all defined here with the properties. Basically, each item of this option, it's a list. Each item came to a function on item click, and I can do some actions here. And it's the same for product popover, right? And the difference here is when the user did a click, I navigate to the path I want, and it's handled by the React router. So that's one of the advantages if you already know React and want to use this other kind of libraries and keep the same look and feel of your design or UI5. UI5 Web Components is the best option in my opinion. So, and we have the transaction page. It's this one I'm showing in the right side. In that page, we have a lot of different parts here. So we start with this, what I call balance box, these three cards here above. And I prefer to define it in a different file. I'm using CRUD from UI5 Web Component, the CRUD component, to define that. And we have a table here. I defined that using transaction table, another file, and using Analytical Table from UI5 Web Component. It's here, okay, and the columns is defined here above in a constant, where we have the two buttons for each row. So it's all defined in this column constant, okay, using the icons from UI5 and everything from that UI5 provides. And of course, we have the dialog as well. I define that as a different component as well, transaction dialog, using a form. The dialog is this form here. And we have a lot of different kinds of input fields, and we have two buttons, the cancel and the save, okay? And to handle the data, it's very simple using the library that Amplify gave us. So I'm fetching data here. Just with this command, I can fetch the data from the DynamoDB table, calling the GraphQL API. And I'm saving that in the transaction dialog component, okay? And it's basically the same. It's just one command offline. I can update or I can save. It's the same for delete, okay? And as I promised, we can just add the authentication for that application. And to do that is very simple. As I provided the backend service for authentication before, right? I just need to import a method here from the library, and I will put all my app inside that method. It means that my application now requires authentication. So I saved this file, and I started to restart the application. That is wait, it's restart the application. Done. So now my application requires authentication. So this authentication flow is handled by Cognito, CodeDB from any other cloud provider, and I can create an account, or I can log in with the account that I already have. And I can capture here the username that are logged. And of course, I can handle the logout, and it's in the profile popover. I have here, when the user click in logout, I call another function from Amplify library, and it just logged me out. The idea here is to show you that it's very simple to use serverless concepts or services to create an application. It can be a simple one or more complex. And the UI5 Web Components is a very good option for you to keep the same look and feel for Fiori. And here's a standalone application, but you can create something that you want to publish in a Fiori Launchpad, or be running together with the other applications and keep the same look and feel. So backing quickly to the slides, you can explore more the code and all the details in that repository. Here I explain a little about the files that you need to copy or copy the content. And here's another list of files. If you do exactly these steps, you will run exactly the same application I show you here. So that's it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Thiago. Are there any questions in the audience? All right. There seem to be no questions online. I think you made it pretty clear. Thank you.